Sure.
Okay, take it away, Diane.
All right. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, Sandy and Yazir. Good to see you both as well. Hi, everybody. I am Diane Perry. I am one of the family resource specialists at the Peel Center. And I'm here with my colleague, Kelly. Did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. I'm Kelly King. I'm an older white woman with long dark hair, and I'm wearing a blouse with a burgundy and black pattern on it today. I am a parent of a son with, and I work remotely from my home, so you may hear him in the background from time to time. So that's the life that we live. I'm a former teacher, and I am the healthcare coordinator at the Peel Center.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'll further describe myself as well. I am a white woman as well with, let's see, it's fake blonde hair, but my roots are brown. And I'm wearing a blue sweater today. And I do wear glasses also that have like a bluish to them. And I am a parent as well. I wear that hat of a young man who was born with Down syndrome, who's going to be 30 in February, which I keep telling myself that because I can't believe it's going to be 30, but I'm trying to say that number so I can believe it. And so since we did our introductions, if you guys wouldn't mind, everyone that's participating today, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat your name and your role, and if you're with like a district or someplace, if you could name that district as well. So that helps with the attendance at the task force for them to add in their minutes as well. And then maybe if you have an idea of what you hope to learn today as well. So Kelly and I, as we go through our presentation today, can hopefully address some of the questions that you might have. And in the end, as Dan had said, since we are recording this, we'll stop the recording. And if there is any other questions after that, we can always take them, or Kelly and I would be happy to, we will be putting our email addresses in the chat as well. And we will also say it over voice wise too, in case the recording, you're not seeing anything on the recording and you're only hearing us, we will be able to offer you that option as well, so you know who we are. All right. So with that, you're here today, making sure you know why you're here, and you're here in attendance. We're going to be talking about attendance and truancy and why it matters. And yes, sometimes it's not a pleasant subject, but it's good to know what the routine is of all of the procedures too. So the Peel Center, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Peel Center, we are what's called the PTI, the Parent Training and Information Center in Pennsylvania, as well as the Family to Family Health Center that Kelly spoke of. She's a coordinator for our Family to Family Health grant as well through the Department of Health. And so the PTI is a Parent Training and Information Center. That's what the letters stand for. And basically what my job is as a family resource specialist under the PTI is I help and guide families through the special education system, understanding your rights, the processes, forms, anything that has to do with special education. And I have several colleagues across the state. The Peel Center is statewide. I work out of the Philadelphia office, and I have a couple colleagues in the eastern part of the state here that help me with all the other counties that are around in this area. And we also have our home office, which is in Pittsburgh, and there's some colleagues there that serve that area. And then we have the middle of the state. We have a couple colleagues that work from home through the middle of the state. So we're able to sprinkle ourselves across statewide to be able to better serve all the families statewide. And as you can see, our mission on the screen is about the Peel Center, and we educate and empower families. And that's part of my job, empowering the families so that they can better understand the processes when they're sitting at meetings with the districts, and or know if they need to advocate for something more for for their child or youth. And we serve youth and young adults, and we have youth coordinators as well across the state that provide trainings and soon to be one-on-one assistance as well to youth. And we serve not just disabilities, but special healthcare needs. And we want the individuals to lead rich, active lives as full members in their schools and in their communities. Okay, I'm not sure if everybody saw on the our first screen, just if you could take a moment to put in the chat your name and where you're from, and what your role is, and where you're representing, and what you might want to learn today. Because today our objectives are that we would like to, we really hope, Kelly and I really hope to help you understand the expectations for school attendance in Pennsylvania, to have a better understanding of the truancy process and an idea of what can be done if truancy becomes an issue, as well as to think about considerations for students with special needs when it comes to attendance issues. And we're also looking forward to possibly hearing more about an innovative approach through the intermediate unit to help with attendance issues as well, when that is requested from the school district. So, attendance matters. Attendance issues have long been a challenge. This is nothing new. But what is new is the pandemic. And unfortunately, with the pandemic came the expectation of remote learning and the break in habit of going to school. And for many, issues of anxiety, among other issues, has really impacted education. And for many students, attendance. Attendance is very important. The research shows that chronic absences in the early school years is associated with reading challenges and poor attendance in the years that follow. If you aren't there, then you can't learn. So addressing issues early is important. And the bottom line is, or the top line in this case, is that attendance really matters. This slide represents some of the 2016 changes to the Pennsylvania truancy regulations. These changes expanded the compulsory attendance age and defined truancy. Compulsory school age is the time when a student is required by law to enroll in and to attend school. As you can see on the slide, truancy is defined as having 3 unexcused days, and habitual truancy would be 6 days. Now, tragically, in 2014, a Philadelphia mother died while serving a short jail sentence as a result of her children's truancy and the inability to pay a hefty fine, which really sparked a debate in Harrisburg. The changes outline how schools are to support families through interventions instead of just sending them to court. Schools are instructed to exercise caution and reason, and the state also maintains that prosecuting for truancy should only be used when other, less punitive measures, for example, an attendance improvement plan, have been unsuccessful. So the schools do have a requirement to report truancy. One of the jobs of a school is to enforce that attendance, no matter what the form of education. That is, just because one is learning through a computer, they are expected to attend. Now, how that attendance is documented during remote instruction may differ from district to district or placement to placement. For example, a student may have to log in by a certain time and get assignments completed. But again, that would vary from the program and the district and what the policies are around all of that. So it's important to know and understand and ask questions. Note that if a student has been absent for 10 consecutive days, a school can remove a student from active membership. But that should only happen after a thorough investigation and must be consistent with the special education regulations. Okay. So while truancy is defined as having 3 unexcused absences and habitual truancy as 6 unexcused, district policies about excused and unexcused absences vary from district to district. Clearly, unexcused absences can pile up, and they can pile up very quickly. A district's attendance policy has to be made available, and expectations should be clearly explained. And you can get your district's, any district's policy on their website. And it should be on their website. And if it's not, then you definitely need to ask questions. And many districts even have, the booklets that they give out in the beginning of the school year. And a lot of times, all of those regulations and policies are all in those booklets, which is probably mostly all online at this point. I guess I'm dating myself, saying that we would get a little book. I don't even know if you get little books anymore, but it is noted somewhere. And I'm sure if that accommodation is needed, that you would need the actual physical book, you can request that from the district as well.
Diane, this is Kelly. I just wanted to say that, while, those are expected to be on the district's website, I've looked many a time for those, and they can be really a challenge to find. So they sometimes have them tucked away in very remote corners.
Good to know. Good to know. This is just a sample, just to give you an idea. Ellie did some research with some districts across the state, and it really does vary widely from district to district on how it is written in their policies. For example, some allow 10 parent excuses while others allow 15. But it's important to know your district's expectations, especially if you have a child with a disability that might have, more significant medical issues, and discussing that and making sure that you're following, as well as the district is following, the policy around excused and unexcused absences. So reading those policies is really important. And sometimes you don't think about that because, as I said on another slide, they pile up and they pile up quickly. So it's important to really know this ahead of time. Okay. I'm still doing this run, right, Kelly? Yeah, okay. I'm going to be handing it off to Kelly in a little bit, but as a consequence of truancy, as a consequence of truancy, 2 unexcused absences, you get those scary letters, and they are scary letters. The letters are that I've read them from the families, what they send, and it's basically a blanket letter, but they are scary. And they are sent out automatically, and they are typically mailed out. So you do get it in your home. All the detail in those letters are very, negative. And that negative things will happen. And if you don't do this, and this will happen. If you don't do, so it can be very intimidating. And just as a side, not a side note, but as a note of reference, that the school districts also need to send these letters out in the parents' preferred language. So if their preferred language is not English, those letters must be in that language so that they would be able to understand what is being said in the for truancy, for those families to know what their next steps are. And the districts are, when I get calls about truancy in the family, and a lot of times at the Peel Center, we do get calls. We get a lot of calls from families, and we're helping them navigate all of this, right? Kelly and I have spoken to many of the families who call us, and it's usually when they get these letters. Unfortunately, they have this letter, or they're ready to go to a meeting, or they're ready to go to truancy court or something like that. And our first question is, has the district, started that school attendance improvement conference? Like, did you have that? Are you talking about it? Are you in conversation with the district? Is there some kind of plan, kind of thing? So you really want to be they're the kinds of questions we're going to be asking. And actually at the top is, have you read your district's policy? That's, you start from the beginning there. That's where it really starts, because you want to be able to know, and number one, are you really out of their policy, and or are they following their policy as well? So it's really important that I think Kelly and I want to stress is just really knowing, again, like what the Peel Center is about, knowing your rights and understanding them so that you can better safeguard yourself and your child and be able to advocate for your child moving forward.
And that last note on your slide there, Diane said that the offer, that letter may include an offer of a school attendance improvement conference. I've seen letters from districts that don't identify what the meeting is, and that doesn't have to come with that first letter. And folks, I want to apologize. Diane misspoke when she mentioned at the beginning of this slide about truancy and getting that letter after 2 unexcused absences. I get take the blame for that. I was looking at the notes last night, and I made a typo there. So 3 is the correct number.
That's why I struggled. I was like, wait a minute. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay. So nevertheless, the district sends those letters out, and when a student becomes habitually truant, which is the accumulation of 6 unexcused absences, then you get another notification. And in that case, they work on scheduling that school attendance improvement conference. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in the next slide. But in this notice that you get, this isn't an invitation, folks. So you don't want to miss this meeting. This is important, because what I've seen happen is when the parent doesn't come to the meeting, they just often have something that says, Johnny will come to school. And, that's not really helpful. It doesn't resolve the issue. It doesn't identify what the barriers. So do participate in that meeting in whatever way you can. And if you're absolutely unable to attend it for any reason, do contact the school and ask if they can make some adjustments. And if they're not obligated to do so, but if they can, try to work that out. They're not going to want to wait a week to have that meeting. This is something that needs to be addressed right away. But you could potentially do it over the phone. You don't necessarily have to come in person. And if it's a work issue, then perhaps you could do it over your lunch break. So think outside of the box here to make that happen. But this has to be done in partnership. And the idea of addressing an attendance issue has to be done in partnership. So it's the district, the parents, people in the parental role, and the student. And, we can't always put we may have been able to put 7-year-old Hakeem on the bus, but 17-year-old Hakeem is another story. And so when Jamar doesn't want to wake up in the morning, that might have been more of a success when he was little, but as they grow, then the battle is more challenging at times. So basically, when this notice comes out, you need to take some action on it. And if your child has a 504 or an IEP, a good action that you can take is to ask that team be involved in this meeting, because there may need to be some changes to the 504 or the IEP as a consequence of whatever the issues are that are leading to the attendance problems. Okay, so identifying barriers and proposing solutions can happen when you've got a bigger group of people and people that are very familiar with the students. So while attendance and truancy are really a general education issue, those nuances about your child because of their special needs or disability, are better known in those smaller teams. So go ahead to the next slide, Diane, and we'll talk
Yeah, I
about.
was just going to add to Kelly, that, just like some examples too. I mean, when, some of the families I speak to, it could be a medical issue, right? So I say to the family, bring that, get the doctor to write the letter, if it's school refusal, sometimes, doctors can, actually talk, a psychologist or something. You bring that information to the table. You have an open conversation with the district. That's why they're there. That's why we're here, to have that conference and to have that support around the student to be able to start to work on trying to get that child back into school.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that a little later on toward the end of the presentation. There are students, just worked with a family. A young lady was in the hospital for a number of days. I've had students who were unenrolled, and because there were medical issues going on and they weren't able to reach the family, but they didn't do a thorough enough investigation. I guess sometimes our situations with our kids are pretty emergent, and dealing with the school and letting them know what's happening isn't necessarily the first thing we leap to. And when things settle down, then we can follow through with that. But this school attendance improvement conference is not just a meeting, like I said, to say that the student's going to come to school. This is a meeting where you dig deep into the issues and come up with some possible solutions. And there are times when, as I said, the school could call you to a meeting about attendance, but they don't call it a student attendance improvement conference. And in fact, a school administrator told me just last week that the school attendance improvement conference had occurred, but he backpedaled and corrected himself when it was figured out that what he was calling a school attendance improvement conference was in fact a phone call that was initiated by the parent about another issue, and that absences eventually came into the conversation. So that meeting should be identified. If you're called to a meeting about attendance, ask what it is. And at that meeting, a plan should be developed and the parent should be given a written copy. Diane, could you pick this up here?
Absolutely, yeah, I sure will. So maybe here are some myths related to truancy. Schools have a wide range of options in dealing with student situations, and legal involvement is not necessary. So plenty of elementary school kids miss a lot of school, setting them up for a pattern of absences. Where there are absences, there is learning loss. Families often dispute truancy successfully. Cases have been pulled back before going to court. When schools fail to follow proper procedure, the courts have been educated and cases have been dismissed and or sent back to the school. Even some county CYS offices have screening procedures to be sure that a school has followed the proper procedure before a case is considered. So there are some, safety pieces, okay, to try and help before it actually gets to court. And if it gets to court, that it is sent back to try and let's figure this out together. So that's why Kelly was really emphasizing that if you get that letter in the very beginning, go to the meeting, try and work it out, and try to figure out what is the best plan to try and get your child or a young adult to school.
Diane, I've also seen situations where there are just errors on the attendance record. So that's one of the first things I ask parents to do. Get a copy and check it.
Good point. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And research indicates that court involvement and punitive responses are not effective. Okay. Parents, guardians, or students have multiple chances to show evidence or explain why a student is struggling with attendance, or has valid reasons for missing school, both before and in court. When initially cited as truant, parents and students can show evidence that absences were justified. such as religious holiday or tutoring, or push for the school to develop a school attendance improvement plan. And advocate for the supports and services to address those attendance barriers. If parents end up before a judge, they can still bring proof, such as the doctor's notes, any kind of correspondence with school staff or other items that show that they took every reasonable step to ensure that the student's attendance. And, and that's the other thing when I'm talking to families, if they're having some type of email exchange about the attendance, that is evidence. If you have a phone call with the district, follow it up with an email and say, thank you for our conversation today. This is what I understand, and this is what we're going to do. And let me know if anything is different, so following up and with that email, even after a phone call, would be helpful too, just in case it ever ends up in front of a judge, anything more. And students and families can also appeal fines and other court orders. So if it does, if you do get a fine or there is some kind of order, you can also appeal that. There's always another option.
Diane, remember too that a fine is a myth. While you might be saying, oh, we have to fine you, that's not true.
Oh, yes, thank you. And one last note on this too is, sadly, race is a factor here too. Unfortunately, statistically, nationally, that is what the research shows. A 2021 study found that on average, Native American and Black students were more likely to have absences defined as unexcused. Black students were nearly 3 times more likely than white students to be petitioned to juvenile court for truancy. The increased possibility of court involvement and the detrimental impacts on academic outcomes for students and their life post-high school both point to a connection between truancy and the school to prison pipeline. So just a little tidbit there as far as the research and what it shows. So when a student has a medical condition, absences can be the norm. Getting a doctor's note can be a burden since many doctors want to see the patient. If your child is treated at CHOP, that's practically impossible sometimes. Some of you have ever had to deal with that. Keep the medical team in the loop about missed days, and if and when necessary, get a letter documenting the ongoing medical issues and likelihood of absences beyond the number a parent can typically excuse. Mental health issues are medical issues. Many with anxiety issues struggle to attend school and to get there on time. Advocate for needed supports and explore what help can be offered before school in order to get your child there. And I've actually have heard of some pretty unique and wonderful ideas that districts have come up with as far as trying to get a child into the school building. I've heard of the personnel actually going to the home and kind of talking to the student and the child and trying to get them to get to school. I've heard of, if the parent can at least get the child to the front of the building, then, school personnel has met them at the car and has walked them in. Sometimes they're there for a certain amount of time to start to get that, trust built back up, depending on if it's like an anxiety issue and things like that. And they can build up that attendance and really, get that working. So schools can be very creative in how they can get students to school. So that's why we really encourage families to have those meetings, keep that open conversation. And if there are these chronic medical issues, that the doctor's notes are very, very helpful. So this is what's
Diane,
called,
just with regard to that, it's not unusual either that there's some partnership with the intensive behavioral health team outside and that they could potentially lend some support in the morning to get a student moving. and you know, up and on the bus.
Okay. Shall I continue? I will. Okay. So this is what's called a BEC, the Basic Education Circular. And these are put out from the Department of Ed, the Bureau of Special Education. So, and there are several of them that are out there. Now, this BEC just highlights the need to consider disability when truancy is being assessed. It clarifies the need to consider the unique circumstance of the student. And you'll see at the bottom, it talks about diverging from the policy to meet the needs of the student with a disability. So, I said an alternate attendance plan is certainly possible. Okay. Now, COVID. We still, unfortunately, still have to talk about COVID because there's been this impact. You know, yes, it's been a couple years, but the impact of that is really, and there is some studies out there that are being done and that are starting to come out around the impact of this around truancy and just what has happened to some students and unfortunately some of the personnel as well, teachers. But this slide identifies some of the problems with attendance related to COVID. Post-COVID, other illnesses have resurgence with a vengeance, and still other sad newly ones are developing. Mental health issues have, as was predicted, been unprecedented. And I know many of you are walking that path of, you know, trying to get those mental health services, whether it be in your homes, whether it be in the school buildings, and or even outside into other locations. It's a crisis. I don't know that many people say that it's a crisis, but it is. And so it's really important to know that and unfortunately trying to work within the constraints of that crisis as well, of not having those services available as quickly as they might have been post, you know, prior to COVID. So, so really, again, just, you know, document everything, go to your school, try to have that open communication. And as a parent, while I never experienced truancy with my children, I can only imagine, like when you get that letter or just the anxiety of even trying to get your child to school, no matter what their age and whatever the issue is, it brings a sense of anxiety to the parent as well. So you don't want to, you may feel embarrassed or you don't want to talk to the school or, you know, whatever that might be. And I'm just speaking from my own experience of how I might be feeling. Keep that open communication with the district. It is so important. And if you can't, find someone that can go and support you, you know, like the Peel Center. We're there to empower families and help them to be able to feel that they can be confident in going to that meeting. So we can help you prep for that meeting as well. Maybe there's a neighbor or another family member or somebody else can even go with you and give you that moral support as well in going to the meeting. So you don't have to do it alone. So keep that in mind as well. But what's a parent to do? Basically, you just stay on top of things and keeping those lines of communication open and keeping track of those absences. So like Kelly said earlier, you know, double check with the school. Sometimes, you know, there's mistakes there too, you know, as far as, you know, what that looks like. Yours might be different than what theirs looks like. So really looking at those two. Put everything in writing. I think I mentioned earlier, again, I can't stress enough about putting everything in writing and reviewing the resources in this PowerPoint. We're going to, towards the end, we're going to be giving you lots of resources, and it's really important to, you know, keep them handy if you need them, and really reach out for help if necessary. Again, school districts have a responsibility to address chronic absenteeism in school before referring cases to child welfare and courts. So many issues can be resolved through effective attendance improvement plans that get at the root causes of that truancy. So as noted, chronic absenteeism is often a symptom of maybe some mental health issue, bullying, homelessness, and possibly a disability. And there's a federal coalition in the Every Student Every Day toolkit that are recommendations that the Education Law Center has supported, including the campaign's promise to de-emphasize punitive and exclusionary responses to absenteeism and truancy. The data on school absenteeism promote the meaningful provision of due process to students and parents when courts are invoked to address absenteeism. Because the root causes of truancy are often complex and diverse, effective solutions and interventions must be individualized with informed input from both parents and the students. And I
So
think
Diane, you think about, I apologize. You mentioned bullying there, and that's not an unusual reason for a student to not want to go to school, not want to get up in the morning, and they're not always forthcoming about that. So watching for signs and indications and keeping open lines of communication with your children is really helpful. I often give a strategy to parents when the student comes home. Sometimes it's a little harder to pull information out of our teens, but they come home and you ask how the day was, and they say, that was the worst day ever. And just repeating their sentence back to them, that was the worst day ever, and inflecting the end can sometimes get them to open up a little more.
Thank you. So just some common problems. The best defense, they say, is a good offense, right? Or best defense, yeah, something like that, whatever that saying is. Keep alert for any problems and address them if attendance is impacted, based, from what Kelly was just saying. And ask about available help and pursue that, and yes, bullying can be one of those issues. Again, all districts must have a bullying policy too. Not only should you know about the attendance policies of your school district, but know that the bullying policies are also posted, and that needs to be followed as well. So getting yourself familiar with those policies is really important. And again, if you call us at the Appeal Center, we're going to ask you, did you go to the website yet? Did you go to your school district website and see what it says? So let's start there. Let's see, what are the options? What is written there? Is it being followed? All those kinds of things. And what can you do as a parent and or student? Because as the students get older, as Kelly made a couple examples, when your children become teens, it makes it a little bit harder.
Yeah, they can sometimes be, on their phone at night. And I've had parents who, caught their teen up on the computer or their iPad in the middle of the night. When you don't get enough sleep at night, getting up in the morning can be a problem. So sometimes parents sleep right through those things. Mm-hmm. So what do we do there on the next slide to prepare for that school attendance process? And then what do we do as a follow-up that? So, as Diane indicated earlier, it's really important if there is any medical practitioner involved, a behavioral health team, perhaps, to get some documentation from them. Maybe it's a therapist that's been addressing some of these issues with bullying or the mental health issues. I had a student whose, anxiety just made it extremely difficult. He just was so lethargic in the morning and not able to get up and moving, just dead weight. And so he had an exception to arrive at the time that his second class started, which was a modification. He was missing some of his school that way while they worked to make the improvements, but at least he wasn't missing the whole day. So sometimes, you have to make those difficult choices. So, it's important to make sure that you have the documentation you need, have all your ducks in a row. And again, if there is a chronic condition for which that student is regularly going to be missing extra days, maybe they've got an immune compromised situation, it is really a great idea to get a letter from the doctor in advance to the effect that, Sarita is a young person in a patient in my care and is being treated for or followed for X, Y, or Z. And as a consequence, will miss more than the allotted number, or miss an excessive number of days. And then they can, ask that the school district accept a parent note in lieu of the doctor's note, because that's going to make everybody's life easier. If you know you're not going to be able to get into the doctor, or the doctor wants to see them before they'll write that note, that's really burdensome. So you have to take your sick child to the doctor, or your child who's got a chronic disability to the doctor in order to get a note. It's really problematic. So that any exception to the attendance plan could be included in a 504 or an IEP, and districts want those periodically. So they don't tend to have any difficulty with accepting those things, but need to be sure that they're valid reasons. And if the student has a 504 or an IEP, those issues that they're experiencing are clearly already documented. So that as School Attendance Improvement Conference, the SAIC, has to happen according to the law before there is a referral to the magistrate or to children, youth, and families. So as a consequence of that meeting, a written plan should be developed, and that should be shared with the parents. So if you don't have those things, they shouldn't be sending you to the magistrate or to children and youth. Those things have to happen first. And the idea is, the spirit of the law that Diane shared with you is much more cooperative, much more trying to resolve the problem, and not as punitive as it's been in the past. The idea is that we're going to come up with a plan, and you're really going to give that plan a genuine try. And it's only when they're not bothering to try at all that the school, could follow up and make some referrals, and understand that while children, youth, and families is another term that might turn your stomach, that too, just like the word truancy, is designed to be a helpful service. And the idea is that they could come in and see, how they could continue to help you. Doesn't always work that way, but that's the idea. And so, people are sent to the magistrate there on the next slide. And these are some more steps here to help through the process, particularly if the school were to send you there without having followed the proper steps. So the first thing you want to do is look back. Did they follow all those steps? Do we have a written plan? Was it shared with me as the parent? And if not, you go back to the school. As I've actually had districts who went to the magistrate, and the question was asked, was the School Attendance Improvement Conference had? Oh, yes. Well, another staff member said, no, we didn't have that. So it could have been like this telephone call that the assistant principal had with the family last week. I said, Mom, I'm doing this truancy training. Can I share that? She said, absolutely, because she wanted parents to know these kinds of things happen. And, it wasn't necessarily intentional, but it wasn't the proper process. I've also had situations where giving information to the families, they wrote a letter to the judge or to the magistrate, and that was redacted, that was, kicked back out, dismissed, discharged, sent back to the district to deal with before it came to them because they didn't follow the process. Unfortunately, some of our magistrates in the court system aren't educated either. So I have families take the education law document. There's one prepared for the judicial, system, and they can educate them. And then that case has, there have been times when those cases have been dismissed. And that doesn't mean they wouldn't get back there again, but that they didn't get there in the first place, and avoid that potential punishment and that depth of involvement. It can really be helpful. So we've had success in having schools withdraw it. Even the very day one district was to have gone to court for a truancy issue, they withdrew it because they recognized that they hadn't followed all the steps. So hopefully you don't get to that point. And with all of this information we've been trying to give you, circumventing all of that stuff would be great. But if you go to the magistrate on that slide, if you have to go, but be ready. So as Diane said earlier, have all your documents, have all your excuses, have copies of your email, explain what you've done, what you're trying to do to address the attendance issues, and have that judge's truancy guide in your hand as well. Again, respectfully, informing a judge of what the expectation is, because these folks may be on the bench for a very long time, and they may be somebody that's new. And when, pieces of legislation change, they may think they know, and, pieces may be missed. And truancy doesn't come up in the summer. It comes up, through the school year, like starting about this time of year until the end of the year as those absences accumulate. So it's not something that's, continuously in their mind. And remember that there isn't any requirement to impose a fine. So you could ask that they be lenient, and that they're trying, and that would be a hardship for you. We have included some really wonderful resources for you, and I hope that you will never need these resources, but here they are in the event that you should, face one of these issues or need to help somebody else. Feel free to pass the information along. So Diane shared that basic education circular with you. So that's there. The Education Law Center has a couple of different tools that we've given to you. And then there's a question and answer facts that is really valuable. And on the next slide, just some more Pennsylvania guidance and some COVID-19 related stuff. While this COVID-19 pandemic is over, there's students dealing with RSV, and God forbid we should have another pandemic or similar type of situation with the school closure. Being equipped with some of this information may be very helpful. And then, of course, Diane referred to some differences in attendance with online and hybrid learning. Our charter schools now are responsible for dealing with the attendance themselves. In the past, before this legislative change, they referred back to the district where they were located to deal with the attendance issues. But you think when you're learning online, you don't physically have to go to a building to be marked in attendance. So there are different ways that that's done. And so that's referred to in that resource. And then on the last page of resources, just, again, some ideas about thinking creatively about reducing chronic absenteeism during COVID. But there are some good ideas just in general. So take a look at these. And then, we developed our Stepping Stones tool. It's an insert to our newsletter about attendance and truancy with a lot of the ideas that we've shared with you. This was done pre-COVID, and of course, COVID created a lot more challenges with attendance, truancy. So do take a look at that if that's of any value to you. All these are, as I said, great resources, which are very helpful. And then we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. And Diane, go ahead to the next slide. But
yeah.
We have an evaluation. So if you could take a look at that, and there's a scanning QR code. So if you want to do that with your phone, we can leave that up a minute. We do get federal funds for the work that we do, and we're asked to, have you answer a couple of questions for us. And if that's a problem, we've also got the link that we can put in the chat for you. And if I can grab that from my notes here.
I also put my email address in the chat for anybody who, if you do have a specific question about a student, probably would be better to email me or Kelly. Kelly will put her email address in the chat as well. But if there's any general questions, I mean, I'm assuming you might want to, if you want to stop the recording or not, Dan. I'm not sure how you want to, unless you want to talk. Do you want to talk about the IU program that's available to school districts?
I mean, again, I just wanted to just jump in, real quick and just thank, Diane and Kelly. I know they'll stay on, for any further discussion within the group, but I just wanted to thank you for the information. And I feel like it's a broken record. I've been on this Right to Education local task force for many years, both as a district representative and now through the IU. And I feel like I keep coming back to the same summary, and it's open communication. I heard it over and over and over again through this presentation, and most of our presentations, it comes down to parents in schools communicating, talking, working through things and not shutting down those lines of communication. So I'm just really happy to hear the presentation and the information that you've shared, and the just the focus on that partnership, because that's really what schools are here for too. We don't want to have to deal with this either, so we're here to help kids, and we want to make sure that we have those open lines of communication. And as Diane pointed out, here at the Montgomery County IU, we help support the local school districts in Montgomery County, and and we help design specific programs for kids that might be where districts are scratching their heads and things like that. We showcase those with our district admin groups, to make them aware of those programs, school attendance improvement programs, where we have teams that we can help send out and do evaluations